Welcome everyone. In this video I'm going to show you how I like to build a ship's wheel or a steering wheel. Some people might refer to it as the helm, although that would describe the ship's wheel with the rest of the steering system as a whole. But anyways, whatever you call it, it is a fun project. And before we get started, let's take a look at the traditional way of building them. This picture is a ship's wheel in progress. It shows the work of Bob Fuller, a true master of his craft. Right in the center we can see a beautiful bronze hub holding 8 spokes with the fellows or segments in between. This end grain to side grain glue joint is not quite enough to keep everything together in the long run, so to overcome the weakness of this joint, some dowels and a large band made out of wood or brass is installed on top of each side as reinforcement. Bob Fuller accomplishes perfection by using a massive lathe setup to craft the band, combined with a very large drill press and a clever jig to cut a receiving groove. This technique allows for precision and exceptional strength, and if that's what you're looking for, this video is not for you. But if you're a guy like me with just the basic woodworking tools, and if you don't mind some imperfections, then keep watching, because there's still a way to make a decent looking ship's wheel that can handle a little bit more than just being hung up on the wall as decoration. First, I have to decide on a layout. Since I cannot afford a bronze hub, yes, those beauties are expensive, I'll have to make my own. Not a big deal. That also allows me to decide on the dimensions. There's really no secret formula here. You just have to make sure that the parts are strong enough and aesthetically to your liking. Now, drawing this on paper to the actual scale not only helps to visualize that, but it will give you a template, specifically for the hub and the fellows. With that, cutting out all the parts becomes a lot easier. As you could see, I used the paper template to roughly cut out all my segments on the scroll saw. Could be done with the jigsaw too, I guess. And then I used a plywood template in combination with a flush cut router bit to get to the final size. Now, I tried to avoid this in the past by just doing this freehand on the belt sander, but each segment ended up slightly different than the next. Also, with that thickness, it's nearly impossible to cut a perfectly square curve with those tools. So I can avoid all of those problems by just using the router. Each segment comes out perfectly square, and most importantly, they're completely identical to each other. Traditionally, all the segments are cut in the same thickness as the spokes, because that provides a flat surface for your wooden band to be glued on. Now, I avoid the lack of massive tools and jigs and the whole complexity of that by using a much thicker segment to start with. That allows me to cut a groove in it that can accept the spoke, and as a result, I more than doubled up the glue surface. And one important detail here is that the added glue surface doesn't involve any end grain anymore. Now, don't get me wrong, the traditional way is still superior without a doubt, but this here is plenty strong enough for what I need it to be, and best of all, I simply can cut the groove on the table saw. Alright, all the parts are cut out. We got 3 pieces for the hub, the bottom, the centerpiece that will accept the spokes, and a top. We got 8 segments that will form the outer circle, and all of them have a cutout to accept the spokes. And then of course 8 spokes, just simple 1x1s. I highly recommend that you cut yourself a couple extra of those, because there's a good chance that in future steps you're going to mess one up, and it's good to be prepared and have a couple extra. Now if you made it that far, I got good news for you. The worst is already over. If I would glue this up right now, I would have technically already a ship's wheel. Speaking of, let's do a quick dry fit. So I'm pretty happy about how all the parts fit together, and honestly everything that happens from here on is just about aesthetics, and the results of that of course depend on your skill set and the tools that are available to you. Now this here is the very first version that I ever built. It's full of mistakes and flaws, but it's a good example to show how just one simple tool can change the look completely. All I used here is a router with 3 different bits just to round over the handles, to cut those grooves, and to add some detail to the spokes. Now my tool set and my skill set improved over the years, so I'm hoping that I can turn this ship's wheel into something even nicer looking. Anyways, let's talk about the glue up. Now in the past I did something like that. Just imagine even more clamps, and it was an absolute disaster. Those are just too many parts to ensure a good joint everywhere. There was always some sort of misalignment, and you just end up with ugly gaps everywhere. Now I do the glue up in stages, starting with all the fellows, followed by the hub, and then in a third stage I slide the spokes with the glue in place. That gives me the chance to refine the hub and the segment wheel in between without any stress, and I can do another dry fit to make sure all of the numbered spokes slide into their place without too much force before the third and final glue up. I'm not gonna lie to you, not every joint is going to be perfect. This is a picture of the worst joint I had, and you can see there's a 1mm glue line, kind of ugly. Most of them have been pretty good though, like this one. I just want you to have realistic expectations if you ever try this. Also, the segment wheel ended up being off by a couple millimeters. Not a big deal for me, nobody will ever see this, but it just shows that even though my method is much easier to build, it does lack precision. Of course, a thick glue line will compromise the strength of the glue joint, so it's really important that you take your time and try your best to get a really snug fit. Now, I wouldn't want to sail around the world with one of those, but if your helm is protected from the elements by a cabin, I would be more than comfortable with that. In the next couple of minutes, I will just let the camera roll and show you the rest of the build, which again is mostly about aesthetics at this point. And yes, you will see me using a lathe. I just got the tool a couple months ago. It would be stupid not to use it, but I want to emphasize that you don't need a lathe for this. Now this wheel controls the mechanism for the bed that can be lowered from the ceiling in our tiny houseboat, and there was no lathe involved in this, just a belt sander to round over the handles. Anyways, enough of the talk, now here's the rest of the build. Now this is the final result. I'm happy with it. This is really a project that gives a lot of room for creativity. And I'm looking forward to explore the possibilities further in the future, because this was definitely not my last one. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and until the next time.